Let's talk about network services. These are the services that's found on your network. Services provided by network hosts. Many services make up a network. Some provide different functionality, where others provide functionality for users or other services. Some services provide services for the users on the network, whether that could be a print functionality or an access to a file, or it could provide a service for the network in general, something like a spam gateway or firewall or some type of service like that. Now, when you have a service like a DNS or web or an authentication service, those are commonly found on a dedicated device in larger networks. So, in organizations and larger networks, they'll have a dedicated server because they are important, they're critical, and they need to be redundant. Whereas on smaller networks, you may find them bundled on an appliance. An appliance like a firewall may also provide DNS, provide firewall services, and other services built right into that one device. So let's look at some of these services and talk about their functionality and what they provide for the network. DNS. DNS is the domain name system, and it converts names to IP addresses and vice versa. How our computers talk is basically by the IP or the binary language. They don't know google.com. And that's where the DNS service comes into play. It converts names to IP addresses so our computers can understand where we're trying to go to. So DNS is distributed, it's a distributed naming service. It's balanced across many servers throughout the internet. Now, this is normally managed by the ISP on a bigger scale, or also it's managed by your IT admins on a smaller scale on the smaller networks. Organizations usually have multiple DNS servers because this is one of those critical services. File share. File share is the one of the most critical or important services that we have on our network because we, as users, we need access to our data, our information, our files, and these are normally stored on a file server. These are centralized locations for our documents, our directories, our videos, our pictures, and other media that we need in a business and in a home environment. Also, file shares can be cloud based with the upcoming Google Cloud and the Google Drive and those type of shared services in the cloud. Some of our file shares have moved away from the local network up to the cloud. And these shares, no matter where they're at, whether in the cloud or locally, will use the standard file management protocols like Windows SMB or the Apple FAP and etc. And generally, these file shares are permission based. So there's some type of authentication that needs to happen and permission levels for these file shares. Print server. Any older networks, print servers was a dedicated server that handled the print functions. And this has kind of changed and migrated to devices that handle print jobs. And in recent technology, the print server functionality is actually built right into the printers, networkable printers, printers that are able to be put right on the network that has the print service printer, the server functionality built right into them. So basically, whatever type a print server this is, it provides a printing service for all the devices on the network. Normally, there could be a software agent of some sort installed on a computer that communicates with that printer, and you can get additional features. Many of the printers nowadays have the built-in network interface, so the printer can actually go directly onto the network, and it has the standard printer protocols: SMB, IPP, and LPD. A syslog server. A syslog server is a centralized server that manages and captures all the log data from network devices on throughout the network. A lot of the devices will send logs to the syslog server, and its job is to maintain those logs. Now, this is very important, one of those critical systems, especially when you need to manage access and controls and authentication and every type of event that happened on the network. Okay, so you can send that to a SIM, something like a SIM. So it's important for security events and auditing. A lot of storage is needed on these type of servers because that's a lot of data that it's receiving off of these network devices. And again, it's receiving the logs of every network device, and for record and authentication purposes and auditing purposes. Web server. We all commonly know what a web server does. It serves us our web pages, whether that's out on the internet or local, on an internal or external web server. These web servers can have pages that's built in the HTML or HTML5, and they serve different functions. For an intranet, that may be an organizational website for information, sharing information, uh, priority information and status updates about the organization, or it can be an external or client facing. Web servers can also be as far as e commerce as well. Different web server roles in different ways that these will have to be secured based on where they're at. And based on the type of makeup of those web pages, these pages could be static or dynamic that updates automatically. A mail server. A mail server manages incoming and outgoing mail, sends outgoing mail from users, and receives and stores mail sent to the users. This is one of those critical functions that, as an organization, this needs to be protected. And there's various ways of protecting a mail server. A lot of times in recent years, you've seen that the mail service itself is now hosted from a either an ISP or a provider like Google, or Microsoft. This is again a critical service. It needs to be up 24 by 27, 24 by 7. And also, there's also security layers that need to be applied to the functionality of the service to ensure that it does not go down. Also, functionality that you need to make sure of is that it has um, filtering and scanning options, spam control, of the like. In some organizations, there is a dedicated server or servers that's responsible for the authentication, the authorization, and the accounting of users accessing the network and opening different shares and features and priorities of the network. This is the role of the accounting, authorization, accounting, or the AAA service. This is a centralized management of authentication for the users on the network. Large and enterprise networks normally have this type of server set up. And sometimes these servers are, because they're so critical, they may be set up in redundancy. So you may have a multiple of these services in a failovers. And again, not needed for smaller networks, but in larger organizations, you would need a dedicated service to track and maintain and manage the authentication of users. In the form of internet appliances, we have spam gateways. Spam is which is unsolicited messages or advertisements are detrimental to businesses. You know, they take a lot of our time, takes unnecessary space. There's security concerns because some of those messages may have phishing attempts and malicious links in software. A spam gateway's job is to stop that mail and filter it and scan it before it reaches the users. By the time that mail reaches the users, it's been scanned. Whatever has been malicious, it has been either blocked or removed. Now, spam gateways are normally set in a part of the network that's not accessible from normal users, but it has connections to the internal network as well as the internet, like a DMZ or something like that. So it's a screen subnet that this spam gateway sits in and filters all the incoming and outgoing mail of the organization. Sometimes this service may not be a dedicated appliance, but it may be hosted by a third party or service. Next generation firewalls. Next generation firewalls are the new iteration of firewalls that do more than just do the standard filtering and access controls based on IP address or destination. Next generation firewalls have other services built right into them. Along the lines of next generation firewalls, we have what's called unified threat management. They're more along the same lines as next generation firewalls because they do the same amount of protection and services. They protect the entire network. It's a single point for protection, and they have many features built bundled right in. So, in addition to the firewall services, it may have malware protection built right into the appliance. Sometimes this malware subscription is annually or monthly updated depending on the subscription provider. That's a dynamic piece of these next generation firewalls where it has active malware that's constantly scanning incoming and outgoing traffic. It can have a built-in spam filter and a URL filter. And sometimes the next generation firewalls also have an intrusion detection system as well as an intrusion prevention system built right in. The next generation firewalls are more of a smarter, forward-thinking design where they're a more of a preventative, blocking these threats happening on the network before they come in. Proxy servers. A proxy server is like an intermediate server. Basically, it takes client a request, it proxies them, and it'll send those requests to where they need to go. Couple things that a proxy server does when it sends those requests, it caches those requests. As if it sees it as being a common or no, routinely requested website, it will cache those to make browsing experience faster. Also, proxy servers provide a layer of access control. It can do URL filtering and content scanning, and there's other controls as well because when that traffic goes out there looking for sites that are not appropriate for the business or maybe malicious, proxy servers can deter those or block those. Sometimes you may come across legacy or embedded systems. Legacy systems are the older systems that have a critical function in an organization, but yet cannot be getting rid of. It may be older technology, it might be an older operating system. There may be endpoint devices that will require a specific agent that's no longer available. These legacy systems, again, are critical to the organizations, but cannot be gotten rid of. So it's our job to make sure that these are protected. Sure, they can be patched to the latest patch, but also sometimes that we may have to require special segregation or attention to these devices as it is to cause harm to other devices on the network, as well as embedded systems. These are purpose-built equipment, maybe proprietary or self-contained, and we have no access to the operating system. It's a self-contained entity. You may find some of this like in alarm systems, time clocks, and industrial equipment. Again, these are purpose built equipment and devices that we want to protect on our networks as well. Sometimes you may come across a SCADA or an ICS system, supervisory control and data acquisition system, SCADA, or an industrial control system. These systems are responsible for industrial type of equipment. And you may find these in industrial, manufacturing, energy, or in factories. And basically, their job is to communicate with those industrial equipment and take real life information that's important, critical to the organization, and feed it to the organization so they can see in real time the production or how the systems are performing. The business functions are critical based on the information that's coming from these computers. These could be distributed systems. They gather information in real time and they'll have some type of alerts and notifications. It could be, again, in a factory as far as the production numbers and so forth. And along those lines. Again, these are what they want to be segregated from the network because these are sensitive functions and they're really critical to the industrial data. You want to keep these separate from the regular production network. Internet of Things. In recent years, we have come to a place where there's a lot of devices that's on our networks. And these devices do a lot of different things. It may be home automation, it may be speakers, HVAC and air conditioning and control and monitoring, appliances, smart doorbells, smart appliances. As things get smarter, they're becoming more internet aware. And as they're on the internet, we have to make sure that these devices are secure. Security considerations rather for internet of thing devices is you may want to make sure that these may be on a separate network as well, and you want to change the default password and settings. A lot of this equipment comes standard default. You don't want to put anything like that on your network because there are hackers out there looking for IoT devices, and they have dedicated resources just looking for these type of devices to manipulate them. So you want to make sure that your security controls that are in place to protect your network from the malicious attacks against the IoT devices. Okay, in this lesson, we covered a lot of ground. We talked about the server roles that you will find in your network. We also talked about internet applications and appliances, as well as SCADA, legacy embedded systems, and the Internet of Things. Thank you for being a part of this lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson.